Hey friends, you may or may not read by now the op-ed at Ammo Land by Rob Pincus and his friend Dan Gross. Dan Gross is formerly with the Brady campaign against gun violence, or whatever the cushy little name is that they have. An anti-gun organization is what it is. Rob Pincus has somehow partnered up with this anti-gun guy from Brady campaign to, it appears, to create a position that did not exist before. But somehow they're going to bring the pro-Second Amendment community and the anti-gun groups together, and it looks like this is somewhat of an audition for Pincus and Gross to actually fill that void. They wrote an op-ed that's on Ammo Land, and I'm just going to point out some of the key things in it that I have a real problem with. One of them is the fact that they are using a lot of the nomenclature of the anti-gun movement. My guess is that Dan Gross wrote the majority of this and Rob just lended his name to it. That's a possibility, because if Rob in fact wrote this, that means that Rob has adopted the nomenclature of the anti-gun movement by calling everything gun violence and using the conjecture that somehow or another this is an issue that we all know is there, and we just haven't labeled it correctly, because now they're labeling it the way the anti-gun movement does. It is clearly written as if it were written from the Brady campaign. One perfect example, and there are many to go over through here, is they say that the fact is a tragedy of horrific proportions happens every day in our nation, both in terms of the number of deaths and injuries that occur with guns and the extent to which they are preventable. Again, that is ignoring the fact that there is a certain element out there that we don't have control over in the gun community that is going to continue to exist. What that is the criminals. They mention that together we can cut the number of gun-involved deaths in our country in half and make all of us safer just by keeping guns from the people we all agree should not have them. They give no solution to that. They don't say why, how, what the methods are to cutting those in half. They just say that they can. Makes me think that somehow or another they are wanting us to ask the question, well, how do we do that, Rob and Dan? They mentioned some key points that we all need to get better at and that we need to realize, because Dan and Rob have figured these things out. They mentioned for the gun control advocates, the people who want to ban guns, that they need to demonstrate an authentic respect for rights, and then they go on to push it a little bit more. Okay, so you are talented enough to be able to convince a person with you who is anti-gun that somehow or another they need to respect our rights. So what that means is, now that the anti-gun movement has this great piece of information from you, that now all they have to say is, whenever they're ready to put forth an anti-gun comment, they just have to say, I respect your rights. I respect the right that you want to own firearms. I respect your Second Amendment rights. But that's like, what's the movie with Will Ferrell that said, as long as I say with all due respect, I can say whatever things I want after that. No, that is not the case. But that's what they're setting up right here. So now be expected to hear the phrase, I respect your rights, and I respect your Second Amendment rights. Now, what is our task as gun rights advocates? For gun rights advocates, it provides reassurance and tangible demonstration that no one is seeking to take rights away from responsible gun owners. If you honestly sit there and write something like that, thinking that my problem in this whole argument about trying to minimize violence, not gun violence, violence in America, is somehow partially my problem, because somehow or another I'm misinformed that this whole group isn't trying to take my rights away. Are you kidding me? Are you absolutely? These are people who have said we need to abolish the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment recognizes my rights to having these firearms. You're telling me that I need to somehow or another partner and pal up with a group of people who feel like I should not have that right. They go on to say that this means truly listening in order to gain a deeper understanding of how our words are being perceived and the many avoidable subtle cues that belie our best intentions and make it easy for those with other motivations to undermine us. So in other words, I need to watch what I say. I need to make sure that I don't say it in the tone that I'm using right this very moment, that I somehow or another need to use a nicer tone and a more cushy, sugary-coated group of words to describe how people are trying to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights so that they feel better about what I'm saying. Yeah, that's not going to happen. So they are defining a problem and then sitting back waiting for us to ask them to fix the problem. This is an audition. This entire thing is simply creating chaos so that they can solve the chaos. This is how the federal government in many cases works. They create a problem so that they can create the solution. This is straight out of the handbook of the federal government and how they hose the Americans across this great country and taking their tax dollars from them and creating some new little thing that needs to be solved because they found that problem, identified it, and now somehow or another they're the only ones, but they have the solution for it. And by the way, I have an accompanying op-ed at ammoland.com where you can go read my written op-ed. It's different than this video, but it contains some of the same information. One of the things that I really mentioned in that op-ed that really kind of rubbed me wrong was that Dan and Rob state in their op-ed that significant evidence shows that there is a shockingly small percentage of dealers. These are FFL dealers in America now. These are people whose livelihood relies on them selling guns the proper way and abiding by the ATF's rules. But Rob and Dan are saying that there's a group of them that don't care about that and that they are selling the overwhelmingly majority of guns used in crimes. That is patently false. That is either a lie or a statement by two ignorant guys that don't know the truth. Because a very simple Google search, and I make mention of this in the article on AmmoLand, that any shaved ape can Google this information and find that in 2016, the Department of Justice did this very type of research on criminals, how they get their guns, where they use their guns, if they're used in crimes or not, and they found that less than 2% of criminals get their guns legally. What does that mean? It means that their statement that there are dealers that are selling the overwhelmingly majority of guns in crimes. We're 20 minutes from the Gulf of Mexico. Down here, we call that a lie. They go on to mention some of the rhetoric that the anti-gun movement says, like that the overwhelmingly majority of Americans support background checks. And their op-ed is a plea for us to lighten up a little bit and allow for what they call universal background checks, which is simply outlawing the private sale of firearms between two people without involving a 4473. I'm not at that point, guys. Now, you'll notice that throughout this thing, I put dollar signs next to this. Again, this is clearly two guys who are looking for some kind of job, whether it's with the Biden administration, whether it's with the DOJ somehow to be the liaison between anti-gun people and pro-gun people, or whichever. But this is without a doubt a plea for business. This is someone who has created a situation that did not exist. They've created a need for something that we don't need. They're saying that you need us. You need us. We have the solutions to cut gun deaths in half by 50% or however long in 10 years. That's what their grand scheme is, without offering the solution, because whenever we ask, they want to be able to say, we've got the solution, but you got to hire us first in order to do that. Don't be surprised if they create a brand new organization within the next few months that somehow or another becomes that new liaison, that new mediation group of people that somehow or another brings everyone together for common sense gun control. This is a sad, distasteful attempt to get a job or create an organization to make money, just like all these other nonprofits out there that are making gazillions of dollars.